All right, guys, we're going to try and pick up where we left off. Sorry, this has got to be a two-parter. I just ran out of time this weekend, and yesterday I had a little relapse, so I'm just trying to shake it off here. Last part of the, or new part of the Cold War, where we left off with the Berlin airlift and the United Nations. During the 1950s, during the Cold War, the ideological differences between the powerful rival nations, particularly the United States and the Soviet Union, prevented the United Nations from really taking a lot of concrete action, a lot of definitive action on many hot spots. But again, this might be a repeat, they are trying to help out different areas of the third world. And just before the dust is settled, we have a new state that is created, and that is the formation of Israel. After World War II, due to the Holocaust, many Jews wanted to leave Europe. As the British were governing the territory of Palestine, the British government mandated an area of Palestine be set aside as a state for the Jewish people to return to their ancestral homeland. Now, the Jews had religious ties to the land, as it is where the religion of Judaism that began thousands of years ago in ancient Mesopotamia. All of the victorious allies felt the need to act due to the genocide of the Jews at the hands of Adolf Hitler and the SS throughout Europe during the Holocaust. So, in 1947, the brand spanking new United Nations passes an international resolution to divide the territory into a state that was one half Jewish and one half Arab. And this was going to be very, very, very difficult, as the Arab nations in the regions strongly protested this. They did not want to accept this resolution. To them, it didn't exist. In addition, many Palestinians were never asked for permission and were angry that they were being forcibly displaced because of what Europeans did to the Jews. So there's a strong British presence there. The United States Marines were sent in to try and occupy and police this big movement. In May of 1948, Jews in Palestine proclaimed the formation of the new independent country of Israel. The United States was the very first country in the world to recognize the existence of the independent state of Israel. And to become a modern country, another established country has to recognize you. They have to say, yes, you exist. The United States, acting quickly, says, yes, we do recognize the creation of a brand new state of Israel. So the United States and Israel have become deeply entwined allies ever since, as Israel is a good presence for the United States in the Middle East and also the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, shortly after this resolution is passed, England kind of draws it up and they get out their little marker and they make a new spot on the map. War begins in 1948, a series of state of war, or many wars. The Israeli proclamation in 1948 sets off a war between Israel and many of its Arabic neighbors. Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. 5 countries are going to attack Israel. But not only were they all defeated, but as rites of warfare going back since time begun, when you lose, some of your stuff gets taken. And Israel says to protect ourselves, we need a buffer. We can't let the enemies come right to the gates before we resist. So some of those Arab states lost territory. Israel took it as a buffer. And since 1948, since that time, there has either been a state of kind of a very high-tension truce or open warfare between Israel and many of its Arabic neighbors. Israel and the United States have been aggressive, taking aggressive measures, training, weapons, rearmament. There are no civilians in Israel. You know, everybody does mandatory military training, and they want to make sure that Israel is able to survive. So as we move into the second half of the 20th century, here come that quick series of battles or wars. In 1956, Israel will once again be attacked. Egypt will attack. And when Egypt loses, the Sinai Peninsula is taken from them. The Jewish state wants a buffer should Egypt ever attack again. In 1967, there is something known as the June War with Syria. After Israel wins again, Israel took what is known as the Golan Heights. You might hear about that in the news from Syria. From the Kingdom of Jordan, Israel will also claim Jerusalem and the West Bank. The West Bank of the famous river there. Anybody know the name of the river? Excellent, Alec. Perfect. There we go. All right. So, the name of the river is the Jordan River, just in case you guys didn't hear Alec. So, anyway, this will serve as a buffer between Israel and those intent on Israel's destruction. In 1973, there is another attack by Egypt. Egypt wanted its occupied lands back, the stuff that Israel took in 1956. But again, Egypt is defeated. Israel simply says, we are not going to negotiate any return of land until our existence is recognized by different Arabic nations. To this end, the Israeli government began to put settlers, moving Jewish citizens, into those occupied territories. This caused a displacement of even more Arabs. And even when there was not a state of war, many of the displaced Arabs were made to feel second class to the Israelis. The Israelis were educated. They had good jobs. They could freely move, where the Arabs could not. And so some of these Palestinians begin to rebel. And in Palestine, a new organization is created, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or the PLO. It was created by a man named Yasser Arafat to wage guerrilla war against Israel. However, in 1979, an enormous move is made by Egypt. A big risk to their leadership role. Even though they're an African country, they are seen as, Arabic, Middle Eastern. And Egypt goes big when they recognize the existence of the State of Israel. In 1979, Egypt recognizes Israel when Egyptian President Anwar Sadat will sign the Camp David Peace Accords, the high watermark of President Jimmy Carter's presidency. During this time, the United States will continue to supply and back Israel, and then the Soviet Union, because we're in the Cold War, begins to back other Arab nations trying to defeat them. The two superpowers will arm their allies as they try to compete for dominant control of this region. And so at the end here, with the conclusion of World War II, the successive wars in Israel, and you got to understand, several times Israel was attacked by 4, 5, and 6 nations. Every time Israel was able to win and beat them back. But Israel is a good example of the regional wars, these Middle Eastern wars that will dominate the second half of the 20th century. We're getting ready to move into Vietnam and Cuba, or Vietnam and Korea tomorrow. And so these are the type of battles that will rage throughout the Cold War, as it is a battle between ideology, United States and democracy and capitalism, and the Soviet Union on communism. So we're going to head now into the Koreas, We're going to stop this here. This is part 2. Next thing you see should be Korea, Vietnam, and Cuba, day 2. Sorry I can't be with you guys, but again, it was called an order, not a request. See you guys soon.